with the oil pan, we need to take care of a few things. First up is to torque the rod bolts. Have your crank turning tool installed and rotate the first rod journal up. Set your torque wrench to the first of the 3 increments. Torque all 4 of the bolts for the first rod journal. Set the wrench to the second increment and torque them again. Then set the wrench to the third and final setting and torque all 4 of these bolts. Rotate the crank so the next rod journal is facing up, and then go through the 3 increments to reach your final torque setting on all of the rod bolts there. After you've done all the rod journals, leave your wrench on the final setting and go through every bolt once more just to be sure. If you miss any of them right now, you're not going to be able to go back and check once you've got the oil pan installed. Next up will be the oil pump. If you have a press-on pickup like this, make sure that the marks that you made earlier in pre-assembly are all still lined up. Then, if your pump uses some kind of collar to hold the drive shaft on, you want to install it now. Most pumps will have some type of solid drive shaft that will just slide into place. Be sure to install this shaft in the right direction so that it'll be able to slide into the block all the way. Hold the shaft while you slip the pump into place and thread in any of your oil pump bolts. Popular opinion says not to use a gasket between the oil pump and the block. Sometimes gasket pieces can break off and get in the oil system. After you torque the oil pump bolt or bolts, check to make sure that the drive shaft is fitted into its slot in the pump, since the block is upside down right now.
Now, if you're sure that the rod bolts are set and all the internals are back in, let's button up the oil pan. Clean the block rail and the edge of the oil pan with some solvent. It's a good idea to touch a few dabs of gasket sealant at a few points along the block rail, just to help your gasket stay lined up over the bolt holes. Now you need to put dabs of silicone sealer at the 4 points where the rear main seal and the front timing cover seal arch up away from the block rail.
Now you can lay your block rail gaskets in place. If they don't fit perfectly in the corners, you might need to cut a few small pieces off with some scissors. If you don't have a one-piece oil pan seal like this, then you'll need to put the front timing cover seal on next. The manufacturers say that you don't need any sealer for rubber or cork style seals. Some gasket sets come with a few choices for the oil pan and front seals. Make sure that you pick the right size gasket from the kit that'll match your timing cover seal and oil pan. The same thing applies to the rear cap seal. Once you have the right one, press it firmly into place. If you have a cork rear cap seal, it's a good idea to coil up the gasket and then hold it shaped together for a couple hours with the rubber band. This will give it a pre-curl, and the gasket will be easier to install and it won't want to bend upwards. With all types of engines, after the front and rear oil pan seals are in place, you should put another 4 dabs of silicone sealer in each of the corners where the oil pan will curve from the block rail to the arc of the front or rear seal. Now you can place the oil pan. Grab your oil pan bolts bin and start with the 4 corner bolts to give you a head start on lining up the rest of them. Thread in the rest of the bolts a few turns by hand. You might need to bang on the pan a little bit to get some of the bolts to start going into their holes, and make sure that you don't push the gasket inside the block. Now you can start seating them with a wrench. When they're all seated hand tight, you could switch to a torque wrench. These bolts are going to have a low torque rating, so hopefully your wrench will be accurate at that low setting. Work around the pan from the center bolts in a spiral outward to the front and rear bolts. If your engine has a thin gap between the oil pan and the timing cover like this, then it's a good idea to lay a thin bead of silicone sealer along that lip. Spread the silicone evenly with a finger and you'll be able to flip the engine back upright. And there you have it. Your short block is completely sealed and assembled.
Before you start putting the head